I never imagined the people capable of hurting me the most would be the same ones who raised me. My parents always favored my younger sister, Emily. She was the golden child, the princess, the one who could do no wrong. While I worked 2 jobs during college, she didn't work a single day yet somehow always had the newest phone, the most expensive clothes, even a car she didn't know how to take care of. They always justified it with excuses like, she's younger, she needs more support, or, you're the responsible one. I swallowed all of it because I wanted peace in the family. But there comes a point when even the strongest thread snaps. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I woke up, checked my phone, and noticed 5 missed calls from my credit card company. Confused, I opened my email, and my heart nearly exploded out of my chest. A charge of $18,000. Not $180. Not $1,800. A full $18,000 for a luxury family vacation package to Italy. A vacation I had never heard about. A vacation I was not invited to. A vacation scheduled for my parents and my sister. My hands shook. I called the company immediately, and they told me the charge was verified by a family member. They even said my mother confirmed the card number over the phone. I felt the heat rush through my face. My own parents had stolen from me. Not borrowed, stolen, using my credit card without permission, leaving me with a bill that could destroy my finances. When they finally woke up and came downstairs, laughing and sipping coffee like nothing had happened, the anger inside me burned like acid. I put my phone on the table and said, "Why did you use my card for a trip?" My mother didn't even flinch. She just said, "You're being dramatic, honey. We'll pay you back once we get the chance. Emily deserves a little break. She's been stressed." Stressed. Emily, who spent all day scrolling social media and complaining about not having enough followers. Emily, who hadn't lifted a finger in weeks except to order takeout. I looked at my father, hoping he would at least show some guilt, but he simply shrugged like it was no big deal. "It's family," he said. "You should be happy we trusted you enough to use your card." That line, that twisted manipulation, snapped something inside me. Happy. They expected me to be happy that they stole from me. That they plunged me into debt for their golden child's comfort. I realized then that they didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. A bank account with legs. Emily walked in wearing expensive sunglasses, probably another thing I unknowingly paid for, and said, "Well, at least the trip will be amazing. You can work overtime to catch up." Her voice dripped with entitlement. Something inside me went cold. That moment, I knew this wouldn't end with an apology. They would never see what they did wrong. They would never treat me as an equal. So I smiled, not because I forgave them, but because a plan formed in my mind. A plan that would make sure they finally faced consequences for treating me like their personal ATM. I went to my room. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I gathered every piece of documentation I had, my credit card statements, previous charges I suspected Emily had made without asking, text messages showing my parents' dismissive behavior. Everything. For years I had brushed things off, but now those small incidents formed a perfect pattern of financial exploitation. I talked to the fraud department again, told them the purchase was unauthorized, and provided proof. They asked if I wanted to file a formal report. I didn't even hesitate. Yes. The woman on the phone said, because the charge was verified by someone other than the cardholder, this qualifies as identity theft and fraudulent misuse. We'll proceed with the investigation. Identity theft, fraud, crimes my parents had committed against their own son. I felt guilty for a moment, just a tiny flicker of guilt, but then I remembered Emily's smirk, my mother's dismissive tone, my father's excuses. No, they made their choices. Now I was making mine. I left the house that afternoon. I needed space. As I drove away, I wondered how they would react when the investigation started, when the company froze the transaction, when the police contacted them. Would they panic? Would they blame me? Of course they would blame me. But this time, their emotional guilt traps wouldn't work. I checked into a small rented room downtown and blocked all their numbers. For the first time in years, I felt free. Hurt, yes. Angry, definitely. But free. I didn't know exactly how the fallout would unfold, but one thing was certain, the days of them walking over me were over. And deep inside, a spark of satisfaction lit up. This was only the beginning. I stayed in that small room for 3 days, trying to calm the storm building inside me. Every hour that passed made me realize how deeply I'd been used. I wasn't just hurt, I was betrayed, financially and emotionally, by the people who were supposed to protect me. On the morning of the fourth day, as I drank cheap coffee and stared out the dusty window, my phone vibrated with an email from the credit card company. The investigation was officially underway. They had frozen the $18,000 charge and forwarded the case to local authorities for verification. My stomach tightened. It was real now. Every step I had taken was now rolling forward like a boulder down a hill, unstoppable. I turned my phone back on for just a moment, and instantly dozens of messages poured in. My mother had sent long paragraphs filled with fake concern, insisting this was a misunderstanding. My father's messages were short and sharp, accusing me of disloyalty. Emily's messages were the worst, screenshots of travel outfits she had planned, followed by insults like, "You ruined everything," and, "Why are you so dramatic? It's not even that big of a deal." They didn't understand. They truly believed they had done nothing wrong. It made my chest burn with rage. By the next afternoon, my parents still had no idea where I was. The police had visited the house to ask questions about the charge. My father called me 12 times, probably expecting I would save them from the mess like I always did. But I let the phone ring. Let them sit in the discomfort for once. Every hour they spent feeling cornered was a tiny piece of justice. On the fifth day, something happened that shifted everything. There was a knock on the door of the room I was renting. I froze. No one knew where I was. When I opened the door, I found my parents' neighbor, Mrs. Coleman, holding a grocery bag. She had seen me come inside days earlier and assumed I was staying. She was kind, the kind of elderly woman who remembered birthdays and gave out cookies during holidays. She said softly, "Your mother and father have been panicking. Police have been there twice. They told the whole neighborhood that you reported them for fraud." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "Did they tell you why?" I asked. She hesitated. "They said you're ungrateful. Ungrateful. After all the nights I stayed up helping my father with paperwork. After all the times I drove Emily to her events because she didn't feel like driving. After all the bills I covered when they said they'd pay me back next month. Ungrateful." That word curved like a hot blade inside my chest. I thanked Mrs. Coleman and closed the door. For a long time, I just stood there in silence, breathing hard. That was the moment I stopped holding any emotional attachment. I didn't feel bad for them anymore. They were embarrassed not because they had betrayed me, but because their image was being stained. They cared about reputation more than me. That realization turned whatever pity I had left into pure resolve. The next morning, I drove back to the house, not to see them, but to gather the rest of my things. I entered quietly. The house felt strangely empty. My parents were in the living room talking to a police officer, their voices shaking with forced innocence. I hid behind the corner of the hallway, listening. "I don't know why our son is doing this," my mother said in a trembling voice. "We were just borrowing the card. It's family." The officer's voice was steady. "Ma'am, borrowing a card requires permission. You verified the purchase over the phone. That makes it unauthorized use." Emily's voice cut in, sharp and irritated. "Can you stop treating us like criminals? It wasn't a big deal." The officer sighed. "It is a big deal. It's a federal offense." I didn't step out. I didn't want them to see me. I just grabbed my bags from my room quietly and slipped out the back door. As I drove away, something inside me clicked. They still thought this was temporary, that if they talked enough, cried enough, manipulated enough, I would take the blame or drop the charges like always. But this time, I wasn't bending. 2 days later, the inevitable happened. The credit card company contacted me to confirm they were formally declaring the charge as fraud and recommending legal action. My heartbeat sped up. This was the moment everything shifted irreversibly. I agreed. I signed every form they sent. I sent them every screenshot, every text message, every piece of evidence showing repeated financial misuse. I even included old statements showing smaller charges that Emily made using my card. The investigator on the phone sounded impressed with the documentation. "You've been dealing with this for a while," she said gently. "Yes," I admitted, "but this time I'm done." That night, I lay on my rented bed, staring at the ceiling. It felt strange, liberating and terrifying at the same time. They would face consequences. Real consequences. My parents. My sister. The people who always believed they were untouchable. The people who believed my loyalty was automatic, unconditional. They never expected me to fight back. But I had. And the shockwave was only beginning. The morning everything finally collapsed for them started with a voicemail from Detective Harris. His tone was calm, almost too calm. He said the investigation had reached the final stage, and because the transaction was confirmed by my mother and connected directly to my sister's email itinerary, the case qualified as intentional identity theft. They would be moving forward with charges unless the family cooperated and paid the amount immediately, plus penalties. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't fear. It was a strange, blazing satisfaction. For once, they were going to face the reality they had always dumped onto me. By the afternoon, my phone began exploding again, ringing nonstop. I didn't answer. I sat beside the small window of my rented room eating a sandwich that didn't even taste like anything. My focus was on the steady vibration of the phone as missed call after missed call appeared. Eventually, a message from my father came through, short, frantic, broken into pieces like he had never learned to form sentences. They're threatening serious charges. Please answer. This is getting out of control. Come talk. Out of control. Only because this time, I didn't step in to fix the mess. Only because this time, they couldn't hide behind family guilt or emotional blackmail. They never thought someone could stand up to them, especially not the child they had spent years conditioning to stay silent. Around 7 p.m., the knock came. Slow at first, then louder. I opened the door and found my mother standing there, eyes red, hair messy, hands shaking. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 5 days. My father stood behind her, stiff, jaw clenched. Emily looked furious, not scared, like she still believed she was the only victim in the entire situation. My mother tried to hug me, but I stepped back. She froze. You're really doing this, she whispered. To your own family. I stared at her. You stole from me. It wasn't stealing. It was just borrowing. You bought an $18,000 vacation and planned to leave me with the bill. That's not borrowing. Emily scoffed. You're so dramatic. It wasn't even that expensive per person. I turned to her slowly. You weren't going to pay for a single dollar of it. None of you were. My father stepped forward. Drop the report. Right now. We'll apologize. We'll pay you back. With what? I snapped. You don't have the money. If you had it, you wouldn't have stolen mine. My father flinched. My mother burst into tears. Emily rolled her eyes. You're ruining our lives over one trip. One trip, I said, my voice rising. You've been using my money for years. You used my cards, my accounts, my savings. You never respected me. You only respected what you could take from me. For the first time, their faces changed, not from fear of the police, but from the realization that I had finally seen the truth clearly. We raised you, my mother sobbed. We took care of you. You raised me, I said quietly, to believe that love means sacrificing everything while getting nothing in return. For a moment, no one said anything. Emily folded her arms like a spoiled child who wasn't used to consequences. My father's shoulders slumped. My mother cried harder. My father said, fine. What do you want? Money. An apology. What will make you drop the charges? I looked at the 3 people who had drained years of strength from me and felt a calmness spread through my chest. I want you, I said, to face the consequences of your choices. My mother gasped like I had slapped her. Emily shouted something, but I didn't even hear it. I walked inside the room, shut the door, and locked it. They pounded on it for almost 10 minutes before giving up. When their car finally drove away, the silence felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. The next morning, Detective Harris called again. My parents had agreed to come in for questioning but refused to admit wrongdoing. That meant the investigation had to continue. The credit card company reversed the charge fully, and the penalties were redirected to the people responsible. My parents were left scrambling, trying to figure out how to pay the money or negotiate legal consequences they had never imagined facing. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just sat on the bed and exhaled, long and slow. It wasn't happiness, it was relief. A release from years of invisible chains. 2 weeks later, I found a small apartment on the other side of the city. I moved quietly, signed a fresh lease, and started a new chapter away from all the chaos. One afternoon, as I unpacked, Mrs. Coleman called to tell me something unexpected. They've sold their car, she said. And they mentioned something about selling Emily's old vacation equipment too. They're trying to gather the money. I closed my eyes. The image of my sister being forced to give up her luxurious lifestyle because of her own entitlement felt surreal. Not satisfying, not joyful, but fair. A month after that, the detective called again. The case was being closed because the full amount had been repaid, including every penalty. My parents had to sign a legal agreement acknowledging liability to avoid criminal charges. Their record wouldn't be spotless, the fraud report would follow them on future financial documents. But they were free from arrest. Then he said something that stayed with me. They asked if you'd ever speak to them again. I didn't answer immediately. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting emotionally, I was thinking clearly. I don't know, I finally said. But I'm not going back. When I hung up, the air in my apartment felt lighter. I opened the window and let the breeze fill the room. For the first time in my life, I was free, financially, emotionally, mentally. Not because they changed, but because I finally did.